Hi, everyone. Welcome to Smart City Institute Japan's webinar series called Global Perspectives on Smart Cities. I'm Tak Nagamo, Executive Managing Director of Smart City Institute Japan. I'm host of this webinar. Today you have distinct speakers from UK. We have three distinct speakers. Let us welcome three distinct speakers. Okay. First, Ms. Patricia Latorre, or Paddy, Head of Strategic Partnership at Humanising Autonomy. Hi, Paddy.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Second person, Mr. Richard Luis, SeniorTrade and FDI Manager, APAC Technology and Smart Cities Department for International Trade. Hi, Mr. Richard.
Hello.
Hi, nice to see you. Okay, last person, Mr. Phillip White, Technology Specialist at Department for International Trade.
Hello, thank you for having me. よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。Okay, so today we have directly connected to UK online, and our topic today is Predictive AI, which is an amazing story to hear. So let us ask Patricia to make a presentation. Okay, over to you, Paddy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let me just get this going. So yes, you're going to hear me talk about our predictive AI software, but more importantly, I'm going to talk to you a lot about also integration. And the unique thing here is that it's really about understanding not just predictive AI for machines, but we focus on people, on you and I. So it's really kind of a different angle and a unique angle that we take in what we do. So first of all, the company Humanizing Autonomy, the idea behind the company is that you and I are interacting more and more with machines. And it's not just autonomous vehicles, because we know we don't have those in urban environments yet, but it's really about any type of vehicle. It can be a traffic light, our phones, elevators that don't understand when we're hitting the buttons. You have self checkouts in grocery stores that don't know if you're bagging or scanning. So everything we're doing nowadays is around machines, but these machines do not understand our behavior. They don't know what we're doing. They don't know what we're going to do next. And so that problem leads to lack of trust, lack of consumer acceptance. Of course, you have safety issues as well. So this is where we come in, and this is the predictive AI, or what we also call behavior AI platform. And we are able to analyze, understand, and predict the behaviors of people. And the key here is that all you need is a camera. We are hardware agnostic, so we can integrate with any camera system, either on a vehicle or an infrastructure camera, or think construction zones, think in airports, train stations. We have cameras everywhere already today. We can use existing ones to provide our analytics. I'm going to focus a lot today, of course, on the mobility and smart city use cases, but it's really going to be, if you think about the use cases here, anywhere you're moving around, anywhere where behavior analytics can help improve efficiency or safety is where we're going to want to be. So how it works, the best example is if any of you have walked somewhere this morning, this evening, or walking down the street, and there's a car behind you. That driver knows what you're going to do fairly accurately based on your behavior, your body language. So that means, if you look up and you look left and right, that's a really big indicator to everyone around you, you might cross the street. It's also about where are you on the sidewalk? So are you close to the edge of the curb, or are you maybe further away from it? These are kind of symbols and signals that you send to the outside world that tell other people what you're going to do next. And the software picks up the same exact kind of nuanced behavior body language. So we can output things like intent to cross. So this predictive AI, telling drivers in vehicles what the vulnerable road users, so pedestrians, cyclists, e-scooter, so anyone on a vehicle, is going to do next. But the idea here is also that, think of it as Lego bricks. So it's built to be modular, so we can build on top of each other. And some use cases, things like distraction or just detection may be enough. but we can, as I said, build on top of that to output things like crossing intent. The whole software is built on a data set that I'll talk about because it's really important. A lot of people always ask about, the difference in cultural behaviors. So we'll talk about that. And so because it's this modular Lego structure, we can deploy in different ways in different settings. And it's really important that it has to be low power. We come from autonomous vehicle, meaning, those are driving computers and you never really have to worry about things like processing power, processing requirements. But of course, if we're talking driver assist products or retrofit, then you have to think about your chips and the powering capabilities they have. So how we deploy is in two different ways. One is edge and one is cloud. Edge, that is your real-time alerts to drivers or to systems. So think about a bus driver with a camera system getting real-time alerts when someone's stepping in front of the vehicle. That can also be with infrastructure cameras for real-time collision, for example. So on the camera, we'll do edge real-time. And then we also have cloud analytics. And cloud is really a key because if you think about video cameras, unlike other sensors, video records all the time unless you turn it off. So very quickly, you get a lot of video data and a lot of it is potentially not very relevant. So the cloud analytics is really important to help us pull out relevant scenes, to help us understand large data amounts. And if you combine the two, that's where you can really think about, getting that insights, understanding how things are working. Also worth noting, here we are talking about smart city, we're talking about mobility, but as I mentioned, anywhere you have people interacting with any sort of machinery, we want to be deployed in. And so we're working with Umbrella, with NVIDIA, Qualcomm, and all the other chip makers, as I touched upon earlier, because that is really important. And those are the ones that are going to help you scale and deploy. And then, of course, the cloud pieces, AWS, Google Cloud, any kind of dashboard or way that customers like to show or visualize data, we can integrate with. So that's really important when you're talking also about scaling, is to make the data accessible and actionable. So I spend a lot of time in my role talking about that. So just kind of quickly on how and who we're deploying with before I show you some examples. But here, we're really focusing, as I keep talking about, is anywhere you have cameras, and you see smart city here as part of the kind of ecosystem we focus on. So we're working with public transit authorities, Transport for London, Transport for Greater Manchester in the UK, but we're also working with fleets. So UPS, Pepsi, Anheuser-Busch, which is one of the world's largest breweries. And these are the kind of deployments that we're using to get the cameras and the system out on the road. And it's really important for us because it's a good way to get feedback from drivers. And we talk a lot about trust and user acceptance. And then we're also talking, of course, about the kind of junction and traffic analysis that we can provide. And so here, again, important to deploy with good manufacturers. And so we've just announced a deal with Nextbase dash cams, which is the world's largest manufacturer of dash cams, and will be kind of in an aftermarket solution that is actually targeted at B2C. So a different angle for us, but something really important and a good example of how we're scaling. So I touched on this briefly, but I think it's worth kind of explaining and mentioning further. So when you are, learning about or dealing with artificial intelligence, it's really important to understand how is the software been trained. So and our approach has been, and we've been working and we've had our country manager in Japan for 2.5 or more years now. It's a good example of how we've been able to use data from all over the world, so from Japan, general Asia Pacific, Europe, and North America, and South America. So our data set is what we believe is to be the world's largest data set of human behaviors. So that's a core focus area of ours. And so we understand cultural differences. I always say, for example, if we only had training data from London, we would think that people look the other way before crossing the road compared to some of the other bigger countries. And so it's a good example of how important training data is. And so cultural differences are kind of built into this, and then the edge cases we're aware of. The other piece to it is that it has to be interpretable. And I touched upon this earlier when I talked about kind of the bus drivers and the drivers that are having these real-time alerts. And think about yourself. If you are buying a new product and you don't understand how it works, to at least to a certain extent, you're less likely to trust it and therefore use it, especially when you're talking with the more advanced AI-based products that you might have in your house or in your car. So it's really important that bus drivers understand, or any driver, but understands the outputs. Why is the software making the decisions it's making? And why is it alerting the driver in that instance? That's really important. And we can look at the code. And because we have that Lego brick, that modular approach, we can understand which one of the behavior factors is triggering an alert. That's really important. That really helps cut down on the false positives. So over alerting is something we really want to avoid. Think about yourselves. If you have a car with probably a backup sensor, reverse sensor in your car, those things beep all the time, even when there's a plant, when there's no one. And so a lot of people don't like relying on them anymore because they used to not be very good. So you have to really make sure that the product you have is only alerting when it's relevant. So now that I've explained kind of, the software overall, what's behind it, I can show you some examples. And this is really where we can focus on the smart city angle. And I used to, when I started the company over 2 years ago, I used to say that this drawing, it's a very futuristic way of looking at a city. You have autonomous vehicles, you have driving or last mile delivery vehicles moving around, but it's really not. It's actually, maybe also due to COVID, this is much, much closer to the future than we think we are. And one of the key things for us, of course, is that all these types of mobility come with cameras, and you have the infrastructure cameras. So that's where we're deploying. That's where we're looking to be, is in all these different use cases. So the first example that I'm going to show you, I will let this play just so you see it's a lot going on in this scene, but that's what is good. And that's what we're trained on. A lot of people always ask, oh, can you really see everyone? Crowded streets, think of Tokyo, New York City, London. And yes, we can, because that is what we're built on. And so the good example here is the software, of course, also has to understand road segmentation. So where is the sidewalk? Where is the street? And we have this individual, so 120, everyone is assigned a random number. Everything is anonymized, pseudonymized in the footage. If you see him in the footage, you might say, oh, he's close to the curb, he might cross the street. The software understands, yes, he's close, but he has no crossing intent. He's actually looking at the building. So this video is on our website as well. So after the webinar, take a look on the website and you'll see it maybe a little bit better. He's looking at the vehicle, at the building. So that means he has low awareness. He hasn't seen the vehicle, but there is a risk, right? He could walk backwards. There's always a risk in all of this. That's why he's marked as yellow. So we're putting a risk level from 0 to 1. And so he's somewhere in the middle in terms of not a traditional crossing intent, but the risk is because he hasn't seen you. And you as a human driver would probably think the same way. I need to be careful. None of us would stop, most likely. If you think back to the scene, you would drive around, you would go slower, but you wouldn't stop. And it's exactly that kind of output that the software provides as well. And so some of these individuals are yellow, they might be further from the edge, but because they've changed their body posture, they may have started walking quicker, slower, other ways of doing it. So these are good examples of how it's working in real time. The other piece, an example of this is an accident actually from London. So I'm going to let this play. So this individual just steps out in front of the bus. But the key thing here is in this moment. At this point, the software is saying, caution, he is going to cross the street. He has a crossing intent. And it happens so quickly, it's really difficult to tell. I'll pull it back a little bit so you see. So when the pink appears, that's when the software has detected it. And this is a good example. He changes his behavior, apologies, so quickly, it's really difficult to the naked eye, but the software is analyzing it, understanding it, and seeing it. And so this time, we would have alerted the driver, and that's, as you see, 2.5 seconds before the accident. So that shows that we can prevent collisions, maybe just also the impact, so reducing the severity of it. But that's really kind of a good example of how, and then a lot of you, if you think back to if you're walking, cycling, driving, you've probably always had these the person changed their mind really quickly, didn't see you, and stepped in front of you. And so these are the types of examples that we work with. Then focusing a little bit more on the smart city angle as well. So we are, and I touched upon this, using the approach of using vehicles and infrastructure cameras and really being in both. And that's the beauty of smart city, right? Smart city is all about sensor and data fusion to help improve quality of life, to improve safety for all of us. And so this is what we're doing here. So this is a project in New York City and Guadalajara, Mexico. So very interesting because they have two very different environments. But here we're going to do a couple different things. So one are these real-time driver alerts that I touched upon. So basically, example from the accident. In this case, the driver will be alerted. We have almost 360-degree view around the vehicle, and they're configurable zones of interest. On this display, it's going to be split in 3 sectors. Middle one for forward facing, and then you have left and right side. Drivers will actually be told in real time what kind of vulnerable road user it is. So is it a pedestrian or is it a cyclist in their blind spot? Because those are 2 very different types of people with very different types of behaviors. And so these kinds of insights we're going to be giving, and an orange or a red alert, depending on how close that person is to the actual vehicle. So that's really, that's happening in real time with our hardware partners there. But the other piece as well, and if you think about if anyone that's working in logistics or fleets, it's telematics, it's fleet management, which is also going to be a really key player, I think, in kind of smart city, understanding where people are driving, how they're using roads. And so we're going to also integrate with the telematics dashboard of these fleets. And we'll be able to see with GPS, for example, you can really understand what intersection, what junction in a city do we have the most alerts? Is it maybe on the right side of the vehicle? Or is it on the left side of the vehicle? So that kind of information can be given back to a city to help improve urban planning. To think about, is it because we don't have a cycle lane here? Is it forward-facing warning because the traffic lights are too short and people don't make it across the street in time? This kind of information is really, really important. And so kind of a way to think of it, we'll always just provide the information, and how it's used and the use case is, of course, customizable. But once you start to understand how to use video, how to use this evidence-based approach, I think the insights and the usability are almost endless. So I touched upon us partnering with Nextbase as well. So this was just announced at CES in January, and we're quite happy with this announcement, but more about kind of what we're going to be doing. And one of the things that's quite unique is what we're able to do is velocity estimation. So we are able, these cameras, they're automatically uploading to the cloud. The customer doesn't have to do anything, but we can provide velocity estimation, which is understanding the speed and the distance of everything you're seeing in the scene. So pedestrians, cyclists, and other vehicles. And I think that's really kind of unique because that also, once again, think about smart city, we can understand, in a construction zone, are people really slowing down? How has the new road layout impacted things? We talked a lot about traffic light timing, and those things be optimized. And then, of course, for accidents, to understand maybe what led to the accident. And so just more examples of if you're using multiple sources of sensors and adding camera to it, you're going to just get a lot more evidence-based information than you previously would have. But of course, I always want to show you a infrastructure example. So here we worked with our partners at Smart Mobility Living Lab. And this is not in terms of a crazy accident scene, but it's a simple way of showing the outputs. And most of you, if you're active in this domain, you're going to know what's possible. But here we're detecting vehicles, we're detecting people, we're also predicting where they're walking. So there is an element of predictive with this arrow. But here, if you think about it, you can really understand to see how are people using the infrastructure. And that's what we're providing. Of course, we can just do counting and trajectories, but it's actually also blinking when people are crossing the street. We're talking about traffic and vehicle detection. We won't use this for enforcement. So there's no parking ticket, there is no police element to this. But what we do want is to just help understand how people are using the infrastructure. And so for example, you see the patterns already. You have a lot more pedestrians on this side of the street than you do on this side. That's something to think about. So then you can understand, why is that happening? Is it because of the buildings that are here? Is it because maybe the underground station is on this side? All sorts of different things to just think about in terms of how the things are being used. And then the other piece, this is a lot of physics-based analysis. A lot of other companies can do this, but if you add the behavior element, then you get into dwelling, you get into heat maps. So we can, with that speed analysis, of course, for example, understand, especially for the cyclists that are driving here, what's going on. And so just much more granular insights that you're able to receive with this approach. This is a screenshot of a bus stop example, also from London, but you can imagine that this is deployable everywhere. So a couple different things that are happening. So one is, as many of you would probably understand, the different type of vehicles to detect. So the software knows this is a bus. It's detecting a person and a scooter. So we're detecting both, not just as one, which is another kind of advantage that we have. It's detecting if this is a car. But what we really looked at here is bus stop behavior analysis. So we looked at, when do people approach the curb to board the bus? And think about yourself, if you've taken the bus, do you wait further away from the curb, or do you wait at the curb? And it's a really kind of interesting behavior thing about our perceived safety, and when do people actually go up to the bus. So different examples of this. They actually also showed in London, the bus shelters are built this way. And when it's not raining, really few people wait underneath them. So it also can then talk about, how else can we use the space? Going back to the smart city angle, we might not want to get rid of them because it does rain a lot in London, but, can you put solar panels on these? How can it be optimized for advertising? So a lot of different things that this kind of insight can give you. And then, so we also did here the skeleton and the orientation of people to really look at, why are they doing what they're doing? How early can we predict it? And then the use case we're always asked about as well is, alerting to a bus driver. Who's actually waiting for a bus? Who's waiting for the vehicle behind you? Who's just waiting maybe to cross the street? So there's, a lot of things that are happening at bus stops that are kind of impeding the flow of traffic. So how can we make that more efficient, more safer for the drivers, for the passengers in the vehicle, and other things? So then here, just another example of something I haven't touched upon yet, which is the topic of near miss or almost accidents. Especially in the smart city domain, this is really interesting because it indicates where patterns of high risk interactions are happening. And you can argue the more of these kinds of incidents you have at one intersection, one junction, the more likely you are going to be to have an accident there. So what we're looking at here, so this is footage from South America, just to kind of show you the different data we're working with. But we've done a couple of different things. So one here on the left, top left, is to look at, just how people are using this crossing. And one of the things we had noticed pretty early on, this was just from a 30-minute clip as well. So you don't always need 7 hours. Sometimes a 30-minute clip is enough to give you an indication of what's going on. And so here we really quickly realized that most people are using back crossing. If you compare the lines to between these two, a lot fewer people are using this. So that was one of the feedbacks we gave to the city to say, okay, whatever's happening outside this field of view, have a think about what could that be. The other piece is we, of course, looked at the traffic, so vehicles that are crossing and going. These are two one-way streets that are intersecting. So it was easier in a way, maybe more difficult. But it's also a good example of how do you visualize data? If we were to combine these two, all you'd see is lines. And it'd be really hard to identify patterns. So sometimes, if you're working with companies like this, make sure that they give you different ways of showing the data because it can really make a difference. But the other piece, probably more relevant here then, is the actual near miss. So we see vehicles here, and actually, and anyone that has a video analytics background here will understand this is quite significant to be able to tell from a turning vehicle that there is a near miss this far away from the camera. So, but we'll look at this again, and it's quite interesting. And many of you have probably been in this scenario before of when something like this happens, a vehicle turning that you just don't see. So we gave this information back to the city. So from the 30-minute clip, we pulled out the near misses we analyzed, just in a separate file for them to look at, to understand what's going on. And then, like I said, talked about the different kind of use cases. And this is a camera very different to the other ones you've seen before in terms of quality, lower frame per second. So it's a good example of just really how we are set up to be hardware agnostic. And then one of the last examples, something we haven't touched upon, is indoor setting as well. And smart city doesn't just have to be outside. It also has to do with public transit. It has to do with accessibility. So here we did actually it was a social distancing analysis in Manchester. So this was back in the first wave of COVID here in the UK, where we had different instructions. So the very beginning of COVID, we were told, the advised distance between people was 2 meters. Then eventually it changed to 1.5 and then changed to 1. So it's a good example of why you need something that's easily configurable, because sometimes your analysis requirements change. But what was more interesting here is just that we looked at not just the people, but actually what are they doing? Where are they slowing down? Where are they waiting? So for example, here on the left or on the right, we had a lot of people, of course, slowing down at stairs, which makes sense. Think about yourself. If you're in a train station, you tend to slow down before you go down the stairs. So when you're talking about, a transmissible virus, that was really important information to know. But just another use case for this was for Manchester to really understand, where are people actually waiting? Where are they walking? So you then talk about how to optimize the inside, the train stations. Where do we put benches? Where do we put ramps for accessibility? So a lot of different use cases, insights that we were able to provide with this, kind of just a couple different cameras, different angles that we were able to cover, and different stations. And so it was quite an interesting use case to look at. And that is it. That is the overview of how we're using our predictive AI to help shape the smart cities of the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paddy. It was impressive, actually. Yeah, this is wonderful. It's so flexible, can be used in various locations, various settings. Thank you so much. And before moving on to open discussion, I would like to have Mr. Richard Lewis for some comments and put in the context on this the webinar as well. Thank you. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
The joys of technology. Right. So thank you for giving the opportunity to speak. I work for the UK government, and I work in the Department for International Trade in the Technology and Smart Cities team. So our job is to promote the UK's excellence in technology and all the wonderful solutions that we have for smart cities. Now, the UK government some years ago realised that technology is going to be useful in the future for making cities more livable, more efficient, and obviously reducing the carbon footprint that the city produces. So what they did is they took the view that government sets the should we say the parameters, sets the skeleton that the private sector then builds upon to develop the innovation, like through artificial intelligence, the companies like Humanising Autonomy can utilize. And as Patricia mentioned in her talk, one of the things the government realized early on is that you've got to make the data sets available so that the companies can utilize this, develop products, and analyze things. So that's why the establishment of the Open Data Institute and government policy was that all public data sets, that obviously privacy taken into consideration, are made available, and it means that data sets are easier to use and companies can innovate from that. So that's one side of the things. Also, the government realized it has to work with the industry so there are a number of there's been a number of test beds, number of sort of like innovations. So through UK RI and the knowledge transfer networks and our catapults, like the Connected Places catapult, which looks at applications in smart cities and transport. The government works in partnership with industry to develop these technologies so that they can be then rolled out on a commercial basis. And that has led to a very, very, very dynamic UK ecosystem in smart cities, with lots and lots of companies with lots of different solutions that are enable cities around the world to become smarter. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's gear up to open discussion time. For viewers, it's your time to make questions, make comments. Put your comments in the chat box, and when you write something in the chat box, please choose all under the pull down menu for this sending the chat box, so we can share what's written in the chat box. All right, so until we get the comments or questions from the viewers, let me ask some questions to you, buddy. And actually, this is more than what I expected. It's wonderful. And this can be used in so much different settings, right? The infrastructure, mobility, manufacturing, logistics, maybe in the hospitals too, in the airport. So wide range of use. So what's the best use, actually most frequently used field of this technology?
So currently, from our perspective, it's still the more traditional mobility. So driver assist or ADAS systems with the dash cams and other rollouts. We originally come from autonomous vehicles, so that's still, of course, also a key domain for us. But yeah, you touched on it, and advertising is another one. It's really, I always say, wherever the outputs of the analysis can improve efficiency or safety. And so senior citizen care, yeah, hospitals is a big one in terms of new use cases. Slip, trip, and fall at construction sites. A lot of people do PPE detection as well already. So I really think kind of, yeah, limitless use cases. And so we've set the North Star for our company to be in every camera, because we really think that we can provide a value add in every use case. I
see. So what's the behind the mechanism? It's the combination of the AI, let's say, and the vision, technology, right? And also maybe behavioral science. What's the contained in the background?
Exactly, it's exactly that. So it's a combination of the machine learning, so that's physics based. So that's detecting when people are coming and keep going in emotion. So that's kind of the traditional. But then exactly, we have behavior psychologists on the team who provide their expertise and understanding more so than any one of us can probably do in terms of what are behaviors, what are normal behaviors and things that you probably don't even think about yourself that you do, but that are exhibited. It's when do you look up, when do you look left and right, these things that are normal to us. And so combining both the physics with the machine learning and then the AI component. And so the tech team, which includes the behavior psychologist, is by far the biggest part of our company, actually.
I see. I'm just curious about how accurate you can sense the behavior, predictive behavior of people. Let's say there are two people with the same height. One is old people, one is a young guy. So, even though their appearance, of course, in terms of height, the same, but behave differently. Maybe older people move slowly, whereas the younger people can move a little bit nimbly, right? So how can you, how accurate is that to sense that such differences?
So on the video that I showed, the accident where the pedestrian just steps out in front of the bus, so that's from a data set in London. And in that data set, and this was over a year ago, we had over 99% accuracy in detecting the prediction aspect. An example you mentioned is a really good one, and we get asked about this a lot, because we're just seeing people. So we won't guess age, we won't guess certain characteristics about you. But what will happen is the software sees beforehand, if you're walking up, it'll understand your speed. So it'll kind of, you can measure in real time. This is the average speed of the person. So that's how their reaction time might be as well. And you do this as a human as well. You see someone elderly walking up, and it's maybe because they have gray hair, or maybe because they have a walking aid of some sort, but you actually probably notice more their behaviors before they get to the intersection that tell you something. And a lot of impairments you can't physically see. But you notice them based on how someone's behaving. So it's exactly that same thing, that same approach of using the behavioral analysis rather than just the physical analysis. So it's a really kind of, a good way of explaining it.
That's very useful. I have my family member who is autistic. Autistic people cannot be, seen, understood physically from outside. But if you keep looking at the person, you can see, okay, this person behaves a little bit different from the mainstream, right? So that you can react to the person in a proper way. So maybe this machine too can do the same proper the reaction to the behavior.
Exactly. When you go back to the hospital use case, or we wouldn't detect certain kind of disabilities or behavioral traits, but it just helps understand the differences and looking at what could be going on. So yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's one question which is, I think it's a typical question. So let me read it for you. And I think you're familiar with this type of question. This is from Mr. Matsubara. Sometimes we tend to blame China doing too much with the face recognition and behavior tracking. How much and how specifically is your proposal different from the Chinese way?
So another very good question. And yeah, we do get this a good amount. So one of the big differences is that we simply will not do facial recognition. That is something we ethically say you cannot do without analyzing personal identifiable traits, which makes it much more difficult to be GDPR compliant or data protection compliant in general. So that's really a big one. What we do look at is your eyes, but we look at gaze. So where are your eyes looking, but not anything else beyond that. And then as I talked about, a lot of the things are then coming down to the training data. It is really important to understand what the software was trained on and what it's trained to do. And that's probably the difference in approach that we take.
I see. Well, probably you can also sense the behavior or movement of vehicles, let's say, not only human being, but the vehicles, motorcycles, whatever moves around can be learned with the machine learning capabilities and detect, if irregular, activities happens. Am I correct?
Exactly. So we do focus on the human, hence the lovely name Humanizing Autonomy. But exactly, you have to understand how vehicles react to people as well. And so what we'll do is we'll provide the information. So for example, an autonomous vehicle, it's up to the AV stack developer or manufacturer to program to then say, based on this distance, based on this speed, the vehicle should slow down, stop. So those kinds of things, more from the in the vehicle side we're active in. And then yeah, as I mentioned, with the velocity estimation of all road participants, you get a lot more insights. And then it's one of the next things we want to look at is also the driver reaction. So in the vehicle facing the driver, the cameras, but that is also a domain where you already have a lot of competition. So you have to think about, yeah, what can be done there. But I think it's the understanding of both angles together that's going to give you really, really good insights and help improve safety.
I see. So not only the autonomous driving car, but the drunken driver, let's say,
Yeah.
driving like this can be detected from outside. It's a good news, right? Okay, okay. And I recognize that this technology is utilized by the consortium of corporations, right? Depending upon which field you apply, but the big names I saw on the logos on the presentation material. So is that usually the case? You form the consortium of the corporations to apply to certain areas?
It depends, I would say. So in the case of working with the UPS, the fleets, Pepsi, those ones, that is more of a consortium. That is where someone got companies together that had a common problem of too many road injuries and fatalities, and said we need to do something about it. But other times, it's more of direct engagement. So with the next phase cameras, for example, that's just a direct kind of licensing agreement. So, but we do both, and that's kind of, I think, also maybe unique to our startup. This is something usually that bigger companies are able to do, but we've put a big emphasis on partnerships from a very early point in the company. So that's enabled us to do more of the Smart Mobility Living Lab in London, of these consortiums in the US, and then actually the same in Japan for us as well.
I see. So assume that you have already applied in certain area in UK, and there is, corporations, forming consortiums around this technology has a subsidiary in Japan. Then it's very easy to bring it up to Japan.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Or vice versa as well. So if it's someone in Japan first, and then we can take it somewhere else. So that's also happened as well.
I see. You mentioned the case of course, UK, but the US and Mexico, Guadalajara. Is there any other countries already, doing this, implemented this technology?
Yep. So we're active in South America. Colombia is a very interesting use case for us, where we're doing a lot of work there. Europe, Netherlands, Germany, UK, obviously, and then Japan. So basically, where we've always put kind of business emphasis on those regions, because we understood those to be part of our growth journey, and so we've been very successful in all those areas.
How do you usually extend your business outside of UK? Through licensing, maybe joint venture, or direct investments? What's the usual case?
Yeah, so it's licensing deals is the business approach, the business model we take. We've always also done in terms of having strategic investors in the company. So for example, in the early, so pre-Series A, the seed funding stage, we already had investors from Japan, which helped us understand the Japanese market, the ecosystem, who to target. Same with the US and same in Germany. And so using that approach, that combination of the investors, of the partnership angle, the ecosystem understanding, we're able to scale that way.
What about the collaboration with the research institute, like universities? Is that also happening?
Yes, that's really important as well. So in the UK, we have the University of Leeds, which is one of the, I think, globally leading research institutions on human factors. So they're working with their team closely since the beginning. And it's a good example of using a simulator in combination with real world data to how to understand, how to leverage this, because especially in the autonomous vehicle, we all understand that simulated data is going to be a key part of training them, deploying them, measuring their safety. So we can combine those approaches. That's what we've been working on. Same with universities in Japan, Germany, and the US. we've been very active in collaborating with, and actually have had interns from all of them in our company already.
Interesting. Well, maybe we can introduce some of the Japanese companies or governmental agencies to you once they are interested. Some of them are already watching this webinar, and we'll post it on YouTube. And you may get some, the contact from them, or maybe to coming to me, and then let's set up some small group meeting on this topic. It's very interesting. All right, and let's move on to the next comments or questions. Actually, it's from Kudo-san. Paddy, thank you so much for exciting presentation. You mentioned 2.5 seconds for predicting human behavior before human makes action. Are you planning to predict earlier in the future, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, for example?
I mean, the earlier the better. That will always be the case. So I wouldn't say no, but I think my tech team would probably tell me that it's going to be very difficult. But that is what we're aiming for, making better predictions earlier, but you have to be sure that they're accurate. So that's probably where the trade-off is. If you predict something 10 seconds before it happens, how accurate will it be? So that's the trade-off, but we're working on both, faster and better.
Right. What if error, mistakes occurs? First of all, human is not perfect, and it's too much to expect the machine to be perfect anyway, because machine is created by human. But what happens to, let's say, machine made a mistake and that led to the accident to happen?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. So one thing that we always do is when we're deployed is that a certain amount of data is retained by us for data quality checks. So to look for these kinds of mistakes to then improve. So you can always do over-the-air updates to the software, the firmware. So that's really important. The other piece, more from a liability aspect, all that is always incorporated in the agreements that we have. Hardware manufacturers have been integrating software for decades into their products, so it's not anything new that's being done here. So all that is always covered and included in anything that we do.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for Mr. Phillip White to putting the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics link to the chat box. So for those interested, please click on it. And move on to the next question from the Matsubara-san. This is the second question. You already mentioned a cyclist. I imagine if a person is with a dog, leashed or even unleashed, that person's movement may be difficult to predict because of far unpredictable movement of dog. Does your prediction algorithm incorporate such type of extreme situation? Tough question.
It is. But we get similar ones. So two things. So one is we won't do animal behavior. So we get asked about this, dogs, cats, or others. We won't do. We're still focusing on the human. But what we will detect is that a person has something with them. And it could be a dog. It can be a suitcase. It can be a pram, for example. Those things do change our behaviors. And it's exactly what the question is asking. So we were detecting that you're carrying something, that maybe you're carrying a big box, your vision is blocked. So those things we will detect to understand that, your risk, your behaviors will be different. So yeah, kind of, it's a yes or no then, I guess, to this question.
I see. Does this also apply to criminal prediction or detection?
So we won't do things like that. We get asked about, threat detection, violence detection. We won't detect knives or guns or these kinds of things because it kind of just goes back to more the ethical use case of the software. And who are you selling it to in that case? So yeah, we've always shied away from those use cases.
I see. Yeah, I know two cities in Japan. One is suffering from the criminals. Another one is the traffic accidents. So second one may be applicable to your case, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. A little bit more, yeah.
I see. All right. Let's move on to next one from Yokoyama-san. can data from cities with sustainability, substantially different urban and transportation environment be used for the AI's learning process? For example, how applicable is data from a city like New York to Japan, where jaywalking is not common?
So yes, they're all usable, they're all interchangeable, because what's important is actually having the combination of both. You don't want to be trained on just one. You know, people always ask about the jaywalking example. It doesn't really matter if you do it or not. It's more about the behavior that you show beforehand that we pick up and alert. So, you know, people always, Japan, Germany are always giving us examples for people where they don't jaywalk. Let me tell you, I'm German, I lived in Germany, people jaywalk there. So it is also about a misperception that we might have about our own cultures. And so, yes, the data is usable and put together. It gives us the best of both worlds, of the what we might think is the non-jaywalking and the jaywalking world. But let me tell you, we're all human beings. We're going to, you know, take the shortest path. We're going to take the path that we think is maybe risky, but quicker and shorter, or, you know, you might jaywalk if you're running late to a meeting. So there are examples and ways of where we, you know, make our own decisions, do different behaviors. But at the end of the day, what's important is having data from all, so that we have the best overarching understanding of human beings. So that's really important to understand.
That's an interesting point. Maybe anthropologists may be interested in your data. You know, beyond the perceptions, you know, data tells the truth, right? So, you know, what's the typical behavior of Japanese people? We assume we know something, but maybe not if the data reveals something new, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. Or for example, also if you know, you can't just tell the software you're driving in Japan, no one jaywalks here, because what about tourists in Tokyo? They're going to jaywalk. So you can't program the software to just say, this is culture, this is what it's like, because, you know, and it's not just that the tourists jaywalk, but they stop in the middle of the road, they take pictures, they don't know where they're going. Cyclists, very different, you know, cyclists tend to run the red lights more. So there is no one culture program that you can input and say, this is what you're going to have in this domain. You always have to account for the edge cases. And so, yeah, and you never know where tourists might be. So you have to be prepared for everything.
Interesting. So other than, you know, the behavioral data, what about the environmental data? Let's say you have, you know, same infrastructure, roads, you know, tracking with a camera, but there's a rainy day, sunny day, snowy day, the darkness, the sunny day, etc. What about the data surrounding the environment?
Yeah, so two things. So one is, will always be as good as the camera can see. So, you know, that's part of it. So if it's raining, if it's foggy, whatever the camera sees, we'll be able to analyze. The other piece is the interesting piece on how weather changes our behavior. So for example, when it's raining, we have an umbrella, we have a jacket, or if it's cold, we tend to kind of bunch up and probably not look around as much. Rather, when it's sunny, everyone's looking happy. So these kinds of things will impact our behaviors. Or, you know, if it's raining, maybe we jaywalk more because we don't want to be soaking wet just standing at a traffic light for half a minute. So those things will impact the behaviors. And you have to, in kind of the future generations of how we envision this, is that you integrate the mapping information. So you know when you're near school, you know when you're near a hospital, you know when you're near a tube station. You think about London or any big city during rush hour, around tube stations, it's more people, it's more cyclists, it's just more traffic. So if that kind of information is integrated with the software to understand where it is within an urban environment, you can fine tune the outputs. You can say, you know, slow down anyways, you're coming into a heavy traffic area. So those are the kinds of examples, especially in smart city, where I think that's going to be, you know, hopefully not too distant future to have the combination of those approaches.
I see. Maybe just the last question from myself, and a little bit extreme question. What about extreme environmental change, like a, you know, big, huge earthquake occurs on the sea coast? Well, if you remember, you know, 10 years ago back in Japan, big earthquake hits, right? And the tsunami came, and you know, it's long forgotten. So no one knows where to escape to. And then as a result, there's lots of victims. But if we know that under the extreme conditions, how people behave, we could have better solutions prepared beforehand, right? Yeah. It's kind of a dream,
yeah.
but
but you got to have a dream and an idea, and then see. I think, yeah, there's it goes back to safety and then other angles of it. So I think that's something to look into further and to understand. And that's where you need to have those behavior psychologists, and then you need to understand in those kinds of situations, how do we act differently, what changes. So yeah, definitely an interesting topic.
Thank you very much. And the last comment from the viewers, Mr. Suzuki, is camera provided with solution or camera maker free? Is there any camera specification required for the ADAS infrastructure, etc.?
So we can come with our preferred hardware partners like a NextSpace or a Vision Track, for example. But because it's built to be hardware agnostic, we can really truly work with any camera. There's no kind of hard requirements. We talk about 1080p is the preferred resolution. That's most cameras nowadays. That's not a groundbreaking standard. It doesn't have to be high definition, those kinds of things. And then all we need to know is that the height it's installed at, but it doesn't matter. We just need to know that for the outputs and the angle for the infrastructure camera. But besides that, it can really truly work with any camera system.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we cleared all the questions. Thank you, Patty, for answering all the questions kindly. And I'd like to pass over to Mr. White, Phillip White, and Mr. Richard Lewis for final comments and conclude this webinar.
All right, thank you. I just like to say thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to showcase one of the really excellent UK companies utilizing AI. And obviously, if you want to know more about the ecosystem, then do contact me. We also have Smart Cities Directory, which has a small sample of the many hundreds that we do in the UK, and that's free and available. So if anybody wants that, do let us know. Philip, anything that you wish to add?
Yes, thank you very much. Fascinating presentation, Paddy, and excellently chaired, Tak. Thank you very much. If I may, I should mention that this is we're organising a number of webinars with the Department for International Trade as part of our Science and Technology Showcase. So I'll post a link to that. So if anybody wishes to register for any of those events, forgive me, Tak, but we did discuss briefly before. And I have a couple of other comments that I was thinking about as Paddy was presenting. So a couple of interesting applications for Japanese companies, especially forklift trucks within factories, I think we touched upon. So that could help greatly to spot near misses and help plan and adjust the layout within factories and forklift truck routes. And also, I'm sure insurance companies are interested in this technology, both to identify potential danger spots, as you did, but also to predict trends in drivers, because as we know, that is a concern, especially in Japan. There have been incidents where elderly people's reaction time has not been as it should be, or they've reacted in the wrong way with adverse effects. So trying to give some indication to help the drivers to recognize when their reaction time is gradually getting longer, help those drivers and also help the insurance companies to manage that risk. To touch on one topic that was you mentioned about crime, of course, predicting crime is difficult, but there's an interesting company that can detect when there have been some signals of a crime or another type of incident using audio within the camera. There is a Cambridge company called Audio Analytics, I'll post the link a bit later to that company, Audio Analytics. That may be of interest to some people. And also the fact that Humanizing Autonomy's solution is modular, so it can explain the AI, which is always a challenge for AI systems. It can explain what part of the module, which module has identified the cause of a near miss, or the reason why an autonomous system has stopped or put on the brake. That's important to explain to the users. I was reading in the news just this morning, there was an incident during the Paralympics in Tokyo when an autonomous vehicle stopped because there was a disabled person about to cross the road, but the operator on the autonomous vehicle, the autonomous bus, overrode that and started the bus again, and it hit this person, unfortunately. So if there's some explanation of the system, why it's taken such action, why there is a near miss, that might help prevent humans automatically overriding something because they hear too many near misses. Those are some thoughts that came from the presentation. I hope that's of help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Patty, Mr. Richard Lewis, and Mr. Phillip White for sharing insights and wonderful products. I'm looking for the next opportunity to collaborate with us, and we are open. So if you have anything new, please come back. And I would like to introduce UK's wonderful products to the Japanese market as well. Okay, this concludes our webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. どうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。じゃあ工藤さんよろしくお願いします。
Yes, so Patty, Mr. Lewis, Mr. White, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. And I see that the science fiction world is becoming true now. And I'm wondering if myself is on the camera and I see myself, and the AI is predicting my behavior, how accurate it is. But anyway, I know that the Patty said 99%, so it's a magnificent number. Let me go back to the programs. And thank you for viewing today. And please cooperate with the questionnaire after this event as viewers will receive questionnaires. And our programs of the webinars will be available on Smart City Japan's Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And also the past videos, including today, will be posted on SCI-Japan YouTube channel. For our programs ahead, today is Monday and UK Science Technology Showcase Part 1. And we had this great presentation by Humanizing Autonomy. And Thursday, we have the second round of UK Science and Technology Showcase. And we have a Neuron from UK startup companies. And they are specialized in, I don't know how to pronounce this well in English, sewers. I think the wastewater pipeline, gesuido. And they have some sensors throughout the pipeline. So this will be interesting to watch. So we hope that the viewers today will come back to view this on Thursday. And Wednesday, we have this, this is Japanese only session, the Agriculture Zero Food Loss by, the Foodland, Hamamatsu City, Shizuoka. So this will be interesting as well. And for SCI-Japan, this was established back in October 2019, and we are in the third year. We have 33 executive advisors, as well as the members is 490. And our global partner organization from Britain, Greater London Authority, and not to mention British Embassy Tokyo. And also, I think Mr. White or Mr. Lewis mentioned Catapult, and Connected Places Catapult, who supports startup companies in UK. They are also our great partners with us. And also we have other Asian as well as European global partners as well. So again, thank you very much for viewing today. And thank you very much for speaking from Britain, 9 hours difference. And thank you all. We will conclude our webinar today. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.